They expected a shuttle. A neat little diplomatic courier with polished hull plating and oversized viewports so the Varelian press could capture humanity's submission delegation in high resolution. The Dominion loved optics. Optics won wars before the first shot, or so they believed. After all, they hadn't technically declared war on humanity. They had simply enforced territorial correction in the Perseus Drift. They had simply boarded a human mining colony. They had simply executed Governor Halvorsen and 12 unarmed workers for administrative defiance. And they had simply broadcast it across 300 systems as a reminder that the Dominion did not tolerate resistance. The humans had protested. They had filed complaints. They had argued internally for 11 months and 3 days. The Varelians monitored every debate, every political fracture, every shouting match across human media. Analysts presented their findings to High Admiral Sareth Kethrall with satisfied confidence. Fragmented species, they concluded. Democratically paralyzed. Militarily capable, but politically restrained. So when the summons was sent, dispatch representatives to formalize your compliance, the docking ring was prepared for something modest. Instead, space folded open like a wound. And something monstrous crawled through. At first, the Varelian sensors refused to categorize it. The mass readings were wrong. The energy signatures were obscene. It was not merely a ship, it was an ecosystem of reactors wrapped in armor kilometers thick. The star behind it dimmed. The object rotated slowly, deliberately, like a predator allowing its prey a good look at its teeth. Silence spread through the Dominion's orbital command deck. "That is not a shuttle," someone whispered. High Admiral Kethrall stepped forward, his tall frame rigid, frilled crest twitching once in restrained irritation. "Identification," he ordered. The transmission that came through was crisp, calm, and unmistakably human. "This is the TCS Indomitable Resolve." The human voice was older, gravel threaded through steel. "You requested a shuttle," the voice continued. "We brought a conversation starter." Across the battleship's hull, enormous armored plates shifted aside with mechanical grace. What lay beneath were not hangars for dignitaries. They were launch arrays. Kethrall's secondary eyelids flickered. "Terran vessel, you are in sovereign Dominion space with unauthorized armaments deployed. Power down immediately and prepare to receive diplomatic envoys." A pause. Then the human chuckled. "Admiral," the voice replied, "you killed our governor during peace talks. Shot him on a live feed. Your officer smiled while doing it. The words weren't shouted. They didn't need to be. You expected us to send a shuttle?" The battleship's reactor signature spiked. Thousands of smaller contacts erupted from its hull like sparks from a grinding blade: strike drones, missile platforms, autonomous fighters. They didn't spread outward defensively. They formed ranks, tight, disciplined, waiting. The Varelian tactical network began issuing alerts in overlapping cascade. "Fleet readiness at 40%. Scramble interceptors. Activate high-grid shields." Kethrall held up a clawed hand, silencing the noise. "You misunderstand the situation," he transmitted coolly. "The Perseus Drift incident was an unfortunate overreach by a regional commander. He has been executed. The Dominion does not condone unnecessary brutality." Another pause. When the human responded, the humor was gone. "We know." Kethrall blinked. "You know. You broadcast his execution, Admiral. You thought it would reassure us." The human's tone sharpened. "It didn't." Without warning, one of the Dominion's forward cruisers exploded. No visible projectile. No warning flare. Just a sudden collapse of shields followed by a kinetic impact that tore through its core like a hammer through glass. The vessel split apart in silence, atmosphere venting in a glittering plume. Gasps rippled across the Varelian command deck. "Return fire!" someone shouted. Plasma lances screamed toward the human drone formations. The drones didn't dodge. They detonated. Not randomly. Each explosion was precisely placed, overloading targeting arrays, disrupting shield harmonics, forcing Dominion ships into defensive realignments that blocked one another's firing arc. It wasn't chaos. It was choreography. The indomitable resolve advanced. Slowly. Deliberately. Like it had all the time in the universe. "Admiral," a sensor officer whispered, voice shaking, "we are detecting additional mass signatures inside the Terran vessel." "How many?" The officer swallowed. "An entire fleet." The truth hit the room like vacuum exposure. The battleship wasn't an escort. It was a carrier on a scale the Dominion had never imagined. Internal bays opened. Heavy cruisers launched from within the behemoth's armored spine, full-sized warships disgorged from a larger predator. One of Kethral's aides let out a quiet, involuntary hiss. The humans hadn't come with a delegation. They had come with a statement. "Open a secure channel," Kethral ordered. The human commander appeared on screen at last. Gray hair cropped short, weathered face lined with something that might have been exhaustion or might have been fury held under control for too long. "This escalation is unnecessary," Kethral began. "The Dominion is prepared to discuss reparations." "Reparations?" the human echoed. His eyes hardened. "You televised our people's deaths." The Dominion's outer defense platforms began firing in synchronized volleys. Energy beams slashed toward the advancing human ship. The beams bent. Space distorted around the indomitable Resolve's hull, gravitational lensing fields curving incoming fire harmlessly aside. The Varelian tactical feed filled with error messages. "Impossible," an engineer muttered. The human commander leaned slightly forward. "You studied our politics," he said. "You watched us argue." "Yes," Kethral answered carefully. "You mistook debate for weakness." Another Dominion cruiser vanished in a white-hot blossom of torn metal. The human's voice lowered. "That was your second mistake." Suddenly, something detached from the underside of the indomitable Resolve, a massive, spear-shaped construct humming with contained violence. It accelerated without visible thrust, cutting through defensive fire as though reality itself parted for it. "Trajectory!" Kethral barked. The tactical officer's voice cracked. "High Spire Orbital Station. The High Spire. Seat of the Dominion Council. Symbol of supremacy. Untouchable. Intercept!" Kethral roared. Fighters swarmed the spear. Missile salvos streaked toward it. Nothing slowed it. The construct impacted the High Spire's central superstructure. But it did not explode. It drilled. Burrowed deep into the station's core. Then it pulsed. A silent wave expanded outward. Lights across the spire flickered and died. Defense grids collapsed. Docked warships went dark mid-command. Across Dominion space, systems blinked out one by one as the electromagnetic cascade propagated through linked network. The human commander's image remained steady on Kethral's display. "We could have destroyed it," he said calmly. "We chose not to." Kethral felt something unfamiliar tighten in his chest. "What do you want?" he demanded. "Public admission of wrongdoing," the human replied. "Full withdrawal from the Perseus drift, and the surrender of the officer who gave the execution order." "He is dead," Kethral insisted. "Yes," the human said. "We know." A beat of silence. "We want the ones who approved the broadcast." The implication hung heavy. The Dominion Council had authorized it unanimously. Kethral's frills trembled. "You would wage interstellar war over 12 miners?" The human commander's jaw clenched. 13. A flicker of confusion crossed Kethral's face. The human leaned back slightly. "You forgot the child." The silence that followed was absolute. Behind the human commander, more ships continued emerging from the indomitable Resolve's cavernous interior. This was not a raid. It was an opening move. "You expected a shuttle," the human said softly. "You expected apologies." The battleship's main spinal weapon began charging, a deep, low hum that seemed to vibrate through vacuum itself. "You underestimated how long we can argue," he continued. A faint, humorless smile touched his lips. And how quickly we unite. The weapon's glow intensified, bending starlight around its axis. Kethrall finally understood the shape of the disaster before him. This was not humanity's ultimate battleship. This was the one they sent first. The human commander's voice became iron. Stand down, Admiral. Or this becomes a demonstration. And for the first time in Dominion history, the Varelians realized they were no longer the empire others feared in the dark. They were the cautionary tale forming in someone else's war speech. And humanity had not come to talk. They had come to collect. The Dominion did not stand down. Empires rarely do. High Admiral Sereth Kethrall stared at the tactical projection of his crippled high spire and made the only decision pride would allow. Full mobilization, he ordered quietly. Activate the perimeter legions. Across the Varelian home system, dormant shipyards split open like metallic flowers. Dreadnoughts slid from construction cradles half-finished but combat-ready. Defense satellites shifted from ceremonial orbit into firing alignment. If humanity wanted spectacle, the Dominion would give it a funeral. On the Terran flagship, the bridge of the indomitable resolve remained unervingly calm. Admiral Thomas Hale stood with hands clasped behind his back, watching alien warships power up on the main display. His officers were mostly gray at the temples, mostly veterans of conflicts humanity preferred not to remember publicly. "Permission to engage at full capacity, sir?" asked Captain Imani Reyes. Hale exhaled through his nose. "Not yet." Reyes raised an eyebrow. "They're spinning up planetary cannons." "I know." A junior comms officer glanced back nervously. "Sir, civilian traffic is evacuating toward inner orbital shelters. They're panicking." Hale's jaw flexed once. "Good," he muttered. On the other side of the void, Admiral Kethrall's fleet surged forward in disciplined formation, 3 concentric assault rings designed to overwhelm through synchronized plasma saturation. It was textbook Dominion doctrine. Annihilate resistance with overwhelming unity. The first volley lit space like a newborn star. Hundreds of plasma beams converged on the indomitable resolve. For a moment, the human flagship vanished inside a boiling sphere of energy. Varelian command decks erupted in relieved hisses. Then the sphere collapsed inward. And the battleship was still there. Scorched, but intact. A ripple shimmered across its hull as adaptive armor plates reconfigured. The human ship did not fire back immediately. It advanced. Slow, steady, deliberate. Kethrall felt a flicker of unease. "Why aren't they returning fire?" one of his strategists whispered. As if in answer, the human fleet dispersed, not retreating, but threading through gaps in the Dominion formation with impossible precision. Then the drones came again. Not detonating this time. Boarding. Thousands of small, magnetized pods slammed into Varelian hulls. Cutting torches flared. Signal interference spiked. "Internal breaches!" shouted a Varelian officer. "They're inside our ships." The first screams filtered across the shared tactical network. Human marines moved like blunt instruments of inevitability. Heavy exosuits, kinetic rifles, old-fashioned shotguns for close quarters. They didn't shout slogans. They didn't taunt. They advanced. A Varelian captain broadcast live from his cruiser as armored figures punched through his command door. "You dare invade a Dominion flagship." The feed ended in static and red mist. On the indomitable resolve, Hale finally spoke. "Begin Phase 2. Deep within the battleship's spine, the main cannon shifted orientation, not toward the high spire. Toward the orbital shipyards. Reyes glanced at him. "Sir, that'll cripple their military production for decades." "That's the idea." The cannon fired. There was no bright beam. No cinematic flare. Just a distortion, a brief folding of space that reappeared inside the largest Varelian shipyard ring. For half a second, nothing happened. Then gravity forgot which direction it was supposed to pull. The shipyard collapsed inward, metal and crew compressing into a catastrophic implosion that birthed a momentary singularity before snapping out of existence. Half the Dominion fleet hesitated. That hesitation cost them everything. Human cruisers launched from within the indomitable Resolve's cavernous bays, flanking at close range. Railguns hammered through weakened shields. Missiles tore open exposed reactor cores. The battle devolved from symmetrical warfare into a slaughter. Kethral watched as decades of military supremacy disintegrated in under an hour. "This is impossible," one of his advisors whispered. "No," Kethral replied hollowly. "It is deliberate." A secure channel flashed on his console. Human priority signal. He accepted. Admiral Hale's weathered face appeared again, lit by the glow of burning alien ships. "You still have planetary cannons," Hale said evenly. "You can fire them. Kill a few of my ships." Kethral's crest twitched. "And you?" Hale's expression didn't change. "We erase your fleet. Then your orbital defenses. Then your military infrastructure. You would exterminate us?" Hale's eyes hardened. "No." The single word carried more weight than any threat. "We're not here for extinction," he continued. "We're here for memory." Kethral felt something cold coil inside him. "Explain." "You made a show of killing our people," Hale said. "You wanted every species watching to see what happens when humans disobey." On the main display behind Hale, another Dominion dreadnought split apart under concentrated human fire. "We're correcting the narrative." As if punctuating his words, a broadcast signal hijacked every Dominion channel. Across Varelian space, citizens saw the same image. Human Marines planting flags inside captured Dominion ship. Shipyards collapsing. High-ranking officers surrendering under armed guard. The overlay text was translated perfectly into Varelian glyph. "This is what happens when you execute our civilians." Kethral's secondary eyelids flickered in disbelief. "You're weaponizing humiliation." Hale allowed himself a thin smile. "You taught us the value of optics." Suddenly, alarms flared on the human flagship. "Sir!" Reyes snapped. "Long-range jump signatures. Multiple. Not Dominion." Both admirals turned to their respective tactical feed. New ships were emerging from slipspace at the edge of the system. Dozens. Then hundreds. Different hull designs. Different energy signatures. The Threxian Combine. The Oral Syndicate. The Karth Dominion's oldest rivals. They had been watching. Kethral felt his blood chill. "They're opportunists," he hissed. "They'll carve us apart while we're weakened." Hale studied the new arrivals, expression unreadable. "Open a channel to the newcomers," he said. A Threxian warlord's visage filled part of the screen, mandibles clicking in amusement. "Terrans," the warlord rasped. "We came to witness your extinction." Hale nodded politely. "You're late." Behind him, the remains of the Dominion fleet drifted in burning fragments. The Threxian warlord's amusement faded. "You intended this." Hale's voice was calm as winter steel. "We knew the Dominion wouldn't stand alone for long. So we made sure you'd all see what happens when someone crosses us." The human fleet shifted formation, not defensively. Aggressively. Facing outward. Toward the newcomers. Kethral stared at the tactical display in dawning horror. "You used us," he whispered. Hale didn't deny it. "You wanted to make an example of humanity," he said. "We decided to return the favor." The main cannon of the indomitable Resolve began charging again, this time aimed not at the Dominion, but at the newly arrived fleet. The Threxian warlord's mandibles froze mid-click. Hale's final words in that moment carried across 3 empires. "Anyone else expecting a shuttle?" And in the silence that followed, the galaxy realized something far worse than a human warship had entered the stage. Humanity had planned this. For 3 full seconds, no one fired. 3 seconds in interstellar warfare is an eternity. It's long enough to regret decisions. Long enough to calculate extinction curve. The Threxian warlord's image flickered on the split display, mandibles twitching in what might have been anger, or restraint. "You would threaten us as well, Terran?" the warlord rasped. Admiral Thomas Hale didn't blink. "Not threaten," he said evenly. Clarify. Behind him, the spinal cannon of the indomitable resolve hummed with restrained apocalypse, gravitational lenses bending starlight into a halo around its axis. Human cruisers pivoted outward, railgun arrays tracking fresh targets with mechanical patience. High Admiral Kethral watched the formation shift and understood the deeper horror. The humans weren't cornered. They were centered. The Dominion fleet, what was left of it, drifted broken between the Terrans and the newcomers. The Threxians and their opportunistic allies had arrived expecting to scavenge. Instead, they had sailed into a demonstration. The Oral Syndicate's sleek, crescent warships began spreading into flanking positions. Perhaps, came the silky voice of an oral matriarch over open channels, we misjudged the scale of this engagement. Hale allowed himself a thin, tired smile. Everyone does. On the Varelian command deck, panic simmered beneath rigid discipline. They will divide us, a strategist hissed to Kethral. If we do not re-engage the humans, the opportunists will tear our borders apart. Kethral's crest drooped, just slightly. We already lost the border, he said quietly. Another Dominion dreadnought ruptured as human marines detonated its reactor from within. The explosion lit the void like a funeral pyre. The Threxian warlord leaned closer to his feed. You orchestrated this, he growled. You lured the Dominion into public defeat. Hale's eyes flicked briefly toward Kethral's image. He broadcast the execution of our civilians, Hale replied. Across your territories. Across ours. We didn't have to lure anyone. The implication hung heavy. You all watched. The Threxian fleet hesitated. Opportunists thrive on weakness. They do not charge into predators mid-meal. A new transmission cut through, unexpected. Dominion civilian frequency. The image that appeared was not a soldier. It was a Varelian elder, robes trembling as much as his voice. To all powers present, the elder said, speaking in trembling but precise common, the Dominion Council formally admits fault in the Perseus Drift incident. Kethral stiffened. Who authorized this broadcast? No one, whispered his comm officer. The council chamber has been seized. On the human bridge, Reyes frowned. Sir, we're intercepting internal Dominion security chatter. Civil unrest. Massive. Hale nodded slowly. Show it. Across the tactical display, feeds flickered from the surface of the Varelian homeworld. Crowds gathered outside governmental towers. Military patrols stood uncertain, weapons lowered. Dominion citizens watched burning shipyards in orbit and listened to the Council's trembling confession. We authorized the execution, the elder continued. We sanctioned the broadcast. We believed humanity too divided to retaliate. The Threxian warlord let out a low, rumbling sound. Your enemy collapses from within, he said to Hale. Convenient. Hale's jaw tightened. Don't mistake this for collapse, he said. It's accountability. Kethral's claws dug into his command console. You've destabilized an entire empire, he spat. Hale met his gaze. You destabilized it when you murdered a child for optics. Silence. The word carried more weight than any explosion. Behind Hale, the massive spear construct remained embedded in the high spire, suppressing its power grid like a needle pinning a specimen. The Threxian fleet began inching backward, subtle thruster bursts, repositioning away from the cannon's line of fire. The Oral ships followed. Opportunists again. Terran, the Threxian warlord said slowly, if we withdraw, will you pursue? Hale considered the question carefully. No. A flicker of surprise crossed alien features across multiple screens. We didn't come to conquer, Hale continued. We came to correct. And if the Dominion rises again? The Oral matriarch asked. Hale's gaze returned to Kethral. Then they'll rise knowing exactly what it costs. For a long moment, the void was still except for drifting debris and the flicker of damaged hulls. Then the Threxian warlord gave a curt nod. This was not our war. His fleet began initiating slipspace jumps, vanishing one by one. The Oral followed. Within minutes, the opportunistic armada had dissolved back into the dark between stars. Only the broken Dominion and the Terran fleet remained. Kethral felt something unfamiliar settle in his chest. Relief. And humiliation. "You could have destroyed us," he said quietly over the secure channel. Hale didn't deny it. "Yes. Why didn't you?" The human admiral exhaled slowly. "Because extinction is easy," he said. "Living with what you did is harder." On the Dominion's homeworld, the council chamber doors burst open under civilian pressure. The elder who had confessed was escorted out, not executed, not silenced. Protected. The political machinery of the Dominion was cracking. And every neighboring empire had seen it happen. Reyes stepped closer to Hale. "Sir, we've achieved total strategic dominance. We can dictate any terms we want." Hale watched the Varelian homeworld rotate slowly beneath the wreckage-strewn sky. "Transmit our terms," he said at last. A document flashed across interstellar networks. Full withdrawal from the Perseus Drift. Permanent demilitarization of the sector. War Crimes Tribunal, public and interstellar. Restitution to the families of the executed. Shared oversight of future first contact protocols. Kethral read the final clause twice. "Shared oversight," he murmured. Hale nodded faintly. "You don't get to handle new species alone anymore." A bitter sound escaped the Varelian admiral. "You intend to supervise us. We intend to make sure no one else broadcasts an execution thinking it's a show of strength." The High Spire's power suppression field flickered as the spear construct powered down. Human Marines began withdrawing from captured vessels. Disciplined, efficient, leaving ships damaged but not destroyed. The message was clear. This had been punishment, not annihilation. As the indomitable Resolve began recalling its dispersed cruisers back into its cavernous hull, Kethral asked the question he'd been avoiding. "Admiral Hale, was this truly your ultimate battleship?" Hale looked almost amused. "No." Kethral closed his eyes briefly. "I thought not." The human admiral's expression turned sober again. "You expected a shuttle," Hale said quietly. "You thought we'd beg." The massive Terran flagship rotated slowly, preparing for departure. "You mistook debate for weakness," Hale continued. "You mistook restraint for fear." A final pause. "We argue because we care what kind of monsters we become." The slipspace engines of the indomitable Resolve began to charge. "When someone forces the argument to end," Hale finished, "we don't send a shuttle." The void twisted. The Terran fleet vanished. And the Dominion was left staring at its own reflection in the wreckage. For the first time in centuries, the galaxy did not fear the Varelian Dominion. It feared the species that had chosen not to destroy it. And that was worse. Silence settled over the Perseus Drift like ash. Not the quiet of peace, but the quiet of a galaxy holding its breath. The Dominion fleet lay shattered, their pride burned away by precision, discipline, and patience. Civilian ships drifted back to orbit, surveying the wreckage of their own militarized empire, their sensors blinking with a mixture of awe and dread. On the bridge of the indomitable Resolve, Admiral Thomas Hale leaned against the rail, fingers brushing the worn edge of the command console. Captain Imani Reyes hovered nearby, scanning the final damage report. "They'll rebuild," she said quietly, almost to herself. "They always do." Hale didn't respond immediately. He watched the screens showing Dominion civilians gathering in orbital stations, staring at the remnants of their proud warship. Some clutched photos of the executed miners. Some trembled in shock at how close their leaders had come to dragging the galaxy into chaos. "They'll rebuild," Hale echoed finally. "But they'll rebuild afraid. And more importantly aware. Every empire that witnessed this, every opportunist waiting in the wings, now knows what happens when humans are underestimated." A soft chime interrupted the reverie. It was the communications officer, young and sharp-eyed. "Sir, the Perseus Drift colonies are responding. Multiple systems confirming secure evacuation." And they're sending messages to the neighboring sectors. Thanking us. Hale allowed himself a brief, wry smile. They'll remember that. History has a long memory for survivors. Reyes studied him. Admiral, did we go too far? He shook his head slowly, eyes returning to the dark expanse outside the bridge. No. We went just far enough. We didn't annihilate them. We made them accountable. Humanity doesn't erase civilizations for mistakes, we enforce consequences. In the Dominion Command Hub, High Admiral Kethrall slumped in his chair. His frills had flattened, his pride shredded. Around him, the remnants of the fleet were silent, scattered like broken toys in orbit. Yet even in defeat, the Dominion's military mind could not stop analyzing, calculating. You could have destroyed us, he muttered into the empty calm, as if testing the weight of the admission. Hale's voice responded over the secure channel, calm, unyielding. Yes, but we chose restraint. And that makes us more dangerous than you imagined. The galaxy began to stir. Word of the Indomitable Resolve's campaign spread faster than any battle report. The child saved, the high spire crippled without total destruction, Dominion fleets humbled, opportunistic empires deterred before striking. Everywhere, the same message echoed. Humans are unpredictable, relentless, and, when crossed, terrifyingly cohesive. A small smile touched Hale's lips as he turned to his officers. Prepare for return to Earth. Inform the colonies that security protocols are now Terran standard. Reyes hesitated, looking at him. And the Dominion? Hale's eyes hardened, reflecting the glow of distant stars. They'll remember their place. And if they forget, we'll remind them. Humanity doesn't forget either. As the Indomitable Resolve slipped into slipspace, the vastness of the battlefield shrank behind them. Broken ships floated silently, survivors clinging to what little remained. The Dominion's leaders would be judged, not just by us, but by their own citizens. And the galaxy would remember the lesson. Humans are not to be underestimated. In the quiet of the bridge, Hale allowed himself a final, private thought. They had expected a shuttle. They had received judgment. And humanity had delivered it with style, precision, and mercy, the most terrifying combination of all. The stars ahead shimmered, unbroken, and Hale knew this was only the beginning. Humanity's presence in the galaxy was no longer negotiable. It was inevitable, and every empire would learn that lesson in its own time. He exhaled. Set course for Earth, he said. Let's remind them who's in charge of first contact. The bridge lights dimmed. The engines hummed to life. And the galaxy, for the first time in millennia, understood the shape of human will. They had underestimated us. They would not make that mistake again. End of Part 4.